Sarah Martinez stood in front of a folding table, covered with dusty picture frames, chipped coffee mugs and forgotten belongings that someone no longer wanted. It was a Saturday morning in Riverside, California, and she had driven 20 minutes to attend a neighborhood garage sale advertised on a handwritten sign taped to a telephone pole. She was not wealthy. She was not an art collector. She was a 34-year-old elementary school teacher, with student loans still hanging over her head and a one-bedroom apartment that needed something on the walls. She had $70 in her wallet and a growing sense that she needed to make her small space feel more like home. The painting that caught her eye was leaning against a cardboard box, half hidden behind a broken lamp. It was not large, maybe 20 inches tall and 16 inches wide, with a simple wooden frame that had seen better days. The paint was old, the colors muted, and the subject was unremarkable at first glance. It showed a landscape, perhaps a field or a countryside scene, rendered in shades of brown, green, and pale yellow. There was no signature visible on the front. There was no label on the back. It looked like the kind of thing someone might hang in a hallway and forget about for decades. Sarah picked it up and turned it over. The back of the canvas was covered in dust and a few spots of what looked like water damage. The frame was loose in one corner. She had no idea who painted it, when it was made, or why it ended up on this table in a stranger's driveway. But something about it appealed to her. Maybe it was the quiet mood of the scene. Maybe it was the way the light seemed to fall across the painted field. Or maybe it was just the fact that she could afford it. She looked at the older woman sitting in a folding chair nearby, sipping coffee from a thermos. The woman was in her 70s, grey-haired, wearing a faded cardigan and reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. She looked tired, like someone who had lived in the same house for 50 years and was finally letting go of the things that no longer mattered. Sarah held up the painting. "How much for this one?" The woman barely glanced at it. $8. Sarah handed over the cash, tucked the painting under her arm, and walked back to her car. She had no idea that in that moment, holding a piece of art she bought for the price of a sandwich and a coffee, she was carrying something worth $10 million. Sarah had grown up in a working-class family in Southern California. Her father had been a mechanic, her mother a receptionist at a dental office. They had taught her the value of money, the importance of education, and the reality that nothing in life came easily. She had worked her way through college, taken out loans she was still paying off, and landed a teaching job that she loved, but that barely covered her rent, utilities, and groceries. She was not struggling in a dramatic way, but she was also not comfortable. Every month was a careful balancing act. Every purchase required thought. She had moved into her apartment 2 years earlier, and it still felt bare. The walls were mostly empty except for a calendar and a few photographs in cheap frames. She had always wanted to decorate, to make the space feel warm and personal. But original art was expensive and posters felt too temporary. So when she saw the sign for the garage sale that Saturday morning, she thought it might be a chance to find something affordable and unique. She did not go to garage sales often. She did not have the time or the energy to spend weekends hunting through other people's discarded belongings. But that morning, she had woken up early, feeling restless, and decided to take a drive. The sale was in a quiet neighborhood she had never visited before, a street lined with older homes and mature trees, the kind of place where people had lived for decades and accumulated a lifetime of possessions. When Sarah arrived, there were already a few people browsing through the items. The driveway was filled with furniture, boxes of books, kitchen appliances, and random household goods. The woman running the sale sat quietly in her chair, answering questions when asked but otherwise keeping to herself. There was no energy, no sales pitch, no attempt to make the items seem more valuable than they were. It was simply a process of clearing out a house. Sarah walked slowly through the tables, picking up a vase here, a book there, but nothing felt right until she saw the painting. It was tucked away, almost hidden, as if it had been placed on the table as an afterthought. When she lifted it and looked at the scene, she felt something she could not quite explain. It was not love at first sight. It was not a moment of certainty. It was just a quiet pull, a feeling that this piece belonged somewhere, and maybe that somewhere was her apartment. She paid the $8, drove home, and hung the painting on the wall above her couch using a nail and a piece of wire she found in a drawer. She stepped back and looked at it for a moment. It was not perfect. The frame was worn. The colors were dull, but it filled the space, and that was enough. For the next 3 weeks, Sarah lived her normal life. She taught her second-grade class, graded papers at night, met friends for dinner on occasion, and came home to her small apartment where the painting hung quietly on the wall. She did not think much about it. She did not research it. She did not wonder where it came from or who had painted it. It was just a piece of decoration, a small improvement to her living space, and nothing more. But then, on a Tuesday evening in late September, Sarah was scrolling through her phone while eating reheated pasta on her couch. She had been watching a video about antique furniture when the algorithm suggested another video, this one about valuable paintings found in unexpected places. She clicked on it out of boredom. The video told the story of a woman in Europe who had discovered a lost masterpiece in her attic, a painting by a forgotten artist that had been missing for over a century. The video explained how certain details, like brushstroke patterns, canvas age, and pigment composition, could reveal the true identity of a work. It showed experts examining paintings under magnifying glasses and ultraviolet light, searching for hidden signatures or maker's marks. Sarah glanced up at the painting on her wall. She looked at it for a long moment, then looked back at her phone. The idea was ridiculous, she thought. Her painting was just a random piece from a garage sale. It was worth $8 because that was what someone thought it was worth. There was no hidden value, no secret history, no lost artist waiting to be rediscovered. But the thought would not leave her alone. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself staring at the painting more often. She started noticing details she had not seen before. The way the light in the scene seemed to come from a specific angle. The texture of the brushstrokes, which were confident and deliberate. The composition, which felt balanced in a way that suggested someone with training had created it. She began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, it was more than it appeared to be. She took the painting down from the wall and examined the back more carefully. The canvas was old, that much was clear. The wooden stretcher frame had a handwritten notation in faded pencil that she could barely make out. It looked like a date, possibly from the early 20th century, but she could not be sure. There was no signature on the front, but when she looked closely at the lower right corner under a bright light, she thought she could see the faint impression of something that might have been painted over or worn away with time. Sarah did what anyone in her position would do. She went online. She searched for information about identifying old paintings, about how to tell if something had value, about where to take a piece of art for evaluation. The results were overwhelming. There were forums filled with people claiming to have found masterpieces that turned out to be worthless reproductions. There were articles warning against scams and fake appraisers. There were auction house websites with glossy photographs of paintings that sold for millions, but no clear path for someone like her to follow. She did not want to look foolish. She did not want to walk into an auction house with a painting she bought for $8 and be laughed out of the building. But she also could not shake the feeling that she needed to know. After a week of research, Sarah decided to take the painting to a small art appraisal shop in downtown Los Angeles. It was a modest place, the kind of business that evaluated estate items and helped people figure out if their grandmother's jewelry or their uncle's coin collection had any real worth. She made an appointment and drove into the city on a Saturday afternoon, the painting wrapped carefully in a blanket and placed in the back seat of her car. The appraiser was a man in his 60s named Richard Calloway. He wore a sweater vest and reading glasses and spoke with the careful, measured tone of someone who had spent decades telling people their treasures were not as valuable as they hoped. Sarah unwrapped the painting and set it on his desk. Richard looked at it for a moment without saying anything. Then he picked it up, turned it over, and examined the back. He pulled a magnifying glass from a drawer and studied the surface of the paint. He ran his fingers along the edges of the canvas. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he set the painting down and looked at Sarah. "Where did you get this?" "A garage sale," she said. "A few weeks ago. I paid $8 for it." Richard nodded slowly. "Do you know anything about its history? Who owned it before?" "No," Sarah said. "The woman running the sale was older. I think she was clearing out a house. She didn't say much." Richard picked up the painting again and held it under a bright desk lamp. He was silent for another long stretch, and Sarah felt her pulse quicken. She had expected him to tell her it was nothing, that it was a nice decorative piece but not worth more than what she paid. She had not expected this kind of scrutiny. "I need to be very careful here," Richard said finally. "I don't want to get your hopes up, but I also don't want to dismiss this without further examination. The age of the canvas, the pigments, the style of the brushwork, they're all consistent with early 20th century American landscape painting. The composition and technique suggest someone with formal training, but without a visible signature or provenance, it's impossible to say for certain who painted this." "Is it worth anything?" Sarah asked. "That depends entirely on who the artist is," Richard said. "If this is the work of an unknown painter, it might be worth a few $100s to the right buyer. But if it's the work of someone significant, someone whose paintings are collected and studied, then the value could be much, much higher." He paused, and Sarah could see him choosing his words carefully. "There's a possibility, and I want to emphasize that this is only a possibility, that this painting was created by an artist named Edward Hopper." Sarah stared at him. The name meant nothing to her. "Who's Edward Hopper?" "He was one of the most important American painters of the 20th century, Richard said. "His work is in major museums around the world. His paintings sell for millions of dollars at auction. He's known for urban scenes and landscapes, for the way he captured light and isolation. If this is his work, and I'm not saying it is, but if it is, then what you're holding is extraordinarily valuable." Sarah felt the room tilt slightly. She gripped the edge of the desk. "How do we find out?" "We need to send it to a specialist," Richard said. "Someone who has studied Hopper's work extensively and can examine it using tools and techniques I don't have access to here. That means sending it to an auction house or a museum with a dedicated authentication team. It also means you'll need to be patient. The process can take months, and there's no guarantee. It could still turn out to be nothing." Sarah left the appraisal shop in a daze. She drove home carefully, the painting once again wrapped in a blanket on the back seat, and spent the rest of the evening sitting on her couch, staring at the wall where the painting had hung. Her mind was racing. She thought about the woman at the garage sale, about the $8 she had paid, about the casual way she had carried the painting to her car. She thought about Edward Hopper, a name she had never heard before, but that now felt impossibly large. She thought about the word millions. She could not sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined the painting being examined under bright lights in a sterile room, experts in white gloves turning it over, studying every inch, debating its authenticity. She imagined them telling her it was real, that she had stumbled onto something extraordinary. And then she imagined them telling her it was not, that it was just an old painting by someone no one remembered, and that her $8 garage sale find was worth exactly that. The next morning, Sarah contacted Christie's, one of the most respected auction houses in the world. She sent them photographs of the painting, along with a brief description of where she had found it, and the initial appraisal from Richard Calloway. She did not expect a response. She assumed her email would be one of hundreds they received every week from people convinced they owned something valuable. But 3 days later, she received a reply. The message was polite and professional, but there was an undercurrent of interest that Sarah could not ignore. The auction house wanted to see the painting in person. They wanted to conduct a full analysis. They asked if she could bring it to their offices in New York, or if she would be willing to have it shipped under insured transport. Sarah took a week off from work and flew to New York with the painting secured in a custom crate that cost her $200 to have made. She could not afford the trip, not really, but she also could not afford not to take it. She stayed in a budget hotel near the airport and took the train into the city, carrying the crate with both hands like it was the most fragile thing in the world. The Christie's building was intimidating, all glass and marble and the kind of quiet wealth that made Sarah feel small. She was greeted by a woman named Dr. Elena Vasquez, a specialist in American art, who had written books and curated exhibitions, and spoke with the kind of authority that came from decades of study. Dr. Vasquez led Sarah to a private examination room where the painting was carefully removed from its crate and placed on a padded table under bright, even lighting. For the next 2 hours, Sarah sat in a chair against the wall and watched as Dr. Vasquez and 2 other experts examined the painting. They used magnifying glasses, ultraviolet lights, and infrared imaging. They took samples of the paint for pigment analysis. They studied the canvas weave and the wood of the stretcher frame. They photographed every inch of the surface and compared the images to a database of known works. They spoke in low voices, using terms Sarah did not understand, and made notes on tablets and laptops. Finally, Dr. Vasquez turned to Sarah. Her expression was neutral, but there was something in her eyes that made Sarah's heart race. "We need more time," she said, "but based on what we've seen so far, we believe there's a strong possibility that this painting is an authentic work by Edward Hopper. The materials, the technique, the composition, they're all consistent with his known pieces from the early 1920s. The canvas and pigments match the period. The brushwork shows the same controlled, deliberate style that defines his landscapes." "But you're not sure," Sarah said. "We're as sure as we can be without definitive documentation," Dr. Vasquez said. "What we need now is to compare this painting to the Catalogue Raisonné, the comprehensive record of all known Hopper works. We need to determine if this piece was ever documented, if it was sold or exhibited, if there's any historical record of its existence. That process will take several weeks, possibly longer. But if everything checks out, if this painting is authenticated as a genuine Edward Hopper, then you're looking at a value in the range of $8 to $10 million. Sarah could not speak. She could not move. The number was so large, so incomprehensible, that it did not feel real. She had walked into a garage sale with $70 in her wallet and walked out with something worth $10 million. It was not possible. It was not the way the world worked. Things like this did not happen to elementary school teachers with student loans and empty walls in one-bedroom apartments. "I need you to understand something," Dr. Vasquez continued. "If this painting is authenticated, it will attract significant attention. Collectors, museums, the press, everyone will want to know the story. You'll need to make decisions about what to do with it, whether to sell it at auction, whether to donate it to a museum, whether to keep it. Those are personal choices, and we can guide you through them, but ultimately, the decision is yours." "And if it's not real?" Sarah asked. "Then it's still a beautiful painting from the early 20th century, Dr. Vasquez said. "It would have some value, perhaps a few $1,000s to the right buyer, but nothing compared to what we're discussing now." Sarah flew back to California the next day, leaving the painting in the care of Christie's for further analysis. She returned to her apartment, to her classroom, to her normal life, but nothing felt normal anymore. She could not tell anyone what was happening. She could not explain to her friends or her family that she might be sitting on a fortune, because she did not want to look foolish if it turned out to be nothing. She could not concentrate on lesson plans or grading papers because her mind kept drifting back to the painting, to the experts in their examination room, to the phrase $8 to $10 million. She waited. Days turned into weeks. She checked her email obsessively, refreshing the screen every few minutes, hoping for an update. She lay awake at night imagining different scenarios. She thought about what she would do with the money if the painting was real. Pay off her student loans, buy a house, help her parents retire, donate to her school, travel, save, invest. The possibilities were endless and overwhelming. And then, 6 weeks after she had left the painting in New York, she received the email she had been waiting for. It was from Dr. Vasquez. The subject line read, "Authentication Results." Sarah's hands were shaking as she opened the message. She read the first line and had to stop, close her eyes and take a deep breath before continuing. The painting had been authenticated. It was a genuine Edward Hopper, a landscape from 1923 that had never been catalogued, never been exhibited, never been documented in any official record. It was a lost work, one that had somehow slipped through the cracks of history and ended up in a garage sale in Riverside, California. Christie's estimated its value at auction to be between $8 and $12 million, depending on market conditions and collector interest. The painting was titled Road and Trees, though no one knew if Hopper himself had given it that name or if it had been assigned later. It depicted a quiet rural scene, a dirt road winding through a field with a line of trees in the distance and soft afternoon light falling across the landscape. It was not one of Hopper's famous works, not one of his iconic images of diners or gas stations or solitary figures in empty rooms, but it was his, and it was real, and it was worth a fortune. Sarah sat at her kitchen table and cried. She cried from relief, from shock, from the sheer impossibility of what had just happened. She had bought an $8 painting at a garage sale, and it had turned out to be a masterpiece. She had done nothing special. She had not been clever or knowledgeable or particularly lucky in any intentional way. She had just seen something she liked and bought it, and now her entire life was about to change. The first decision Sarah had to make was whether to sell the painting or keep it. Christie's offered to include it in their next major American art auction, scheduled for the following spring. They explained that a work of this significance, especially one with such an unusual provenance, would generate enormous interest. Collectors and museums around the world would compete for it. The publicity alone would be substantial, but they also made it clear that the choice was entirely hers. Sarah thought about keeping the painting. She thought about how it had hung on her wall for 3 weeks, how she had looked at it every day without knowing what it was, how it had felt like hers in a way that was personal and private. But she also thought about the practical realities of her life. She was not wealthy. She did not have the resources to insure a $10 million painting or the security to protect it. She could not hang it in her apartment and go about her daily routine knowing that it was worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. And more than that, she thought about what the money could do, not just for her, but for the people she cared about and the causes she believed in. She decided to sell. The auction was held on a Thursday evening in May at Christie's Rockefeller Center location. Sarah flew to New York again, this time with her parents, who still could not fully comprehend what was happening. They sat in the auction room, a space that felt more like a theater than a gallery, with rows of seats facing a podium and large screens displaying the lots as they came up for bidding. The room was filled with collectors, dealers, museum representatives, and journalists. The energy was electric. When Road and Trees appeared on the screen, the auctioneer opened the bidding at $5 million. Within seconds, the price climbed to $6 million, then $7 million, then $8 million. Bids came from the room, from phone representatives, and from online participants. Sarah watched the numbers rise on the screen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Her mother gripped her hand. Her father sat in stunned silence. The bidding slowed as the price approached $10 million. There were 3 serious contenders left: a private collector in the room, a representative from a major museum on the phone, and an anonymous online bidder. The tension was unbearable. The auctioneer called for final bids, his voice calm and measured despite the stakes. The final bid came from the online participant, $10,200,000. The auctioneer waited, scanning the room, giving the other bidders one last chance. No one moved. He brought down the gavel. Sold. The room erupted in applause. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. She had just sold a painting she bought for $8 for more than $10 million. The transaction was not complete yet. There were buyer's premiums, auction fees, taxes, and legal processes to navigate. But the core truth remained. She had walked into a garage sale one Saturday morning and walked out with a fortune she never could have imagined. After the auction, after the paperwork was signed and the checks were processed, Sarah received a net payment of just over $9 million. The auction house took their commission, the IRS took their share, and her lawyers and accountants ensured that everything was handled properly. But when the dust settled, Sarah had more money than she had ever dreamed of. The first thing she did was pay off her student loans, all of them, every penny. She logged into her account, transferred the full balance, and watched the number drop to 0. It was a small gesture compared to the size of her windfall, but it felt monumental. For years, those loans had been a weight, a monthly reminder of debt and limitation. Now they were gone. She paid off her parents' mortgage. They had been making payments on their modest house for 25 years, and Sarah wanted them to own it outright, to have that security and freedom. When she told them what she had done, her father cried for the first time in her memory. She donated $1 million to the elementary school where she taught, funding a new library, updated technology for every classroom, and scholarships for students in need. She set up a trust to ensure the money would be used responsibly and have a lasting impact. She bought a house for herself. Nothing extravagant, just a comfortable 3-bedroom home with a yard and good light and space for the life she wanted to build. She furnished it simply and hung a few pieces of art on the walls, none of them expensive, all of them chosen because she genuinely liked them. She invested the rest of the money with the guidance of financial advisors who helped her understand wealth management, tax strategy, and long-term planning. She was not interested in living a lavish lifestyle. She did not want cars or jewelry or private jets. She wanted stability, security, and the freedom to make choices without the constant pressure of financial stress. But even as she settled into her new reality, Sarah could not stop thinking about the painting itself. She thought about Edward Hopper, about the fact that he had created this work nearly a century ago and had no idea where it would end up. She thought about the woman at the garage sale, about how the painting had been in her possession, sitting in her house for who knows how long, and she had never known its value. She thought about all the objects in the world that carry hidden worth, waiting for someone to recognize them. She also thought about the chain of events that had to align for this to happen. If she had not woken up early that Saturday morning, if she had not seen the handwritten sign, if the painting had been positioned differently on the table, if she had hesitated or decided $8 was too much, if she had never watched that video about valuable paintings. Any one of those moments could have gone differently, and she would still be living in her one-bedroom apartment, still paying off her loans, still hanging cheap posters on her walls. There was something both humbling and unsettling about that realization. It reminded her how much of life was chance, how opportunity and disaster could hinge on the smallest decisions, how wealth and poverty could be separated by nothing more than a moment of curiosity or a stroke of luck. Sarah stayed in touch with Dr. Vasquez and the team at Christie's. She learned more about Edward Hopper, about his life and his work, and the way his paintings had come to define a certain vision of American solitude and light. She visited museums to see his other pieces, standing in front of nighthawks and early Sunday morning, and feeling a strange connection to an artist she had never heard of 6 months earlier. She also tried to find out more about the painting's history, about how it had ended up in that garage sale in Riverside. Christie's helped her trace the ownership as far back as they could, but the trail went cold in the 1950s. The painting had changed hands several times, always privately, never through major galleries or auction houses. At some point, it had been forgotten, misattributed, or simply overlooked. It had passed through estates and storage units and eventually wound up on a folding table in someone's driveway, priced at $8 because no one knew any better. Sarah thought about contacting the woman who had sold it to her, but in the end, she decided against it. There was no legal obligation. The sale had been fair and straightforward. The woman had set the price, Sarah had paid it, and the transaction was complete. To reach out now after the painting had been authenticated and sold for millions felt complicated in ways Sarah could not fully articulate. It felt like opening a door to guilt or regret or bitterness that might not need to be opened, so she let it be. Instead, she focused on her own life and the ways it had changed. She continued teaching for another year, not because she needed the money, but because she loved the work and did not want to abandon her students in the middle of the school year. When the year ended, she took a sabbatical to travel, to visit museums and galleries around the world, to see great art in person and understand the history and context that gave it meaning. She became a quiet philanthropist, donating to causes she believed in without seeking recognition or publicity. She supported arts education, funded scholarships for low-income students, and contributed to organizations that helped people struggling with debt and financial instability. She did not want to be famous. She did not want her story to define her. She just wanted to use the resources she had been given to make a difference in the lives of others. As the months passed, Sarah found herself reflecting on the concept of value and how it is assigned to objects, to art, to moments in time. The painting had been worth $8 because that was what someone thought it was worth in that moment. Then it was worth $10 million because experts with knowledge and authority said it was. But in a deeper sense, the painting's value had not changed. It was the same piece of canvas and pigment it had always been. What changed was the context, the information, the recognition. Sarah thought about how many things in the world carried hidden value, not just in monetary terms, but in meaning and significance. A handwritten letter in an attic, a photograph in a shoebox, a recipe passed down through generations, a moment of kindness between strangers. The world was full of treasures that went unrecognized because people did not know what they were looking at or did not take the time to look closely. The story of the $8 painting spread through the art world and beyond. Journalists wrote articles. Television programs featured segments. Sarah was interviewed several times, always reluctantly, because she did not feel like she had done anything remarkable. She had just bought a painting she liked. The rest was luck and the expertise of people who knew more than she did. But people were fascinated by the story because it touched on something universal. The fantasy that wealth and fortune could be hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by anyone with a little curiosity and a willingness to take a chance. For Sarah, the experience was transformative, not because of the money, though that certainly changed her life, but because of what it taught her about attention and possibility. She learned that the world was full of overlooked things, that value was not always obvious, and that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries came from the simplest actions. She learned that fortune, in all its forms, often hid in plain sight. It hid in garage sales and estate auctions and forgotten storage units. It hid in moments of curiosity, in the decision to stop and look, in the willingness to take something home, even when it seemed unremarkable. It hid in the patient work of experts who studied and authenticated and revealed the truth. And it hid in the stories people told afterward, the way a single object could carry history and meaning and change lives in ways no one could have predicted. Sarah kept one photograph from the auction, an image of road and trees displayed on the screen in the Christie's auction room, the final bid visible beneath it. She framed the photograph and hung it in her new house, not in a prominent place but in a quiet corner, where she would see it occasionally and remember. She did not need to own the painting to appreciate what it had given her. She did not need to possess it to understand its value. What she had learned, what she carried with her, was the knowledge that the world was full of secrets waiting to be discovered. That fortune was not just about wealth, but about the unexpected ways life could change. That sometimes the most valuable things were the ones no one else saw. And that $8, spent on a Saturday morning in a stranger's driveway, could open a door to a future no one could have imagined. The painting itself now belongs to a private collector who purchased it at auction. It hangs in a climate-controlled gallery in a home somewhere in the world, protected and preserved and appreciated for what it truly is. Sarah does not know where it is, and she does not need to. She had her time with it. She hung it on her wall and looked at it every day for 3 weeks without knowing its significance. And maybe that was the most honest relationship anyone could have with a work of art, seeing it simply for what it was, without the weight of value or history or expectation. In the end, Sarah's story is not just about finding a valuable painting. It is about recognizing that value exists in unexpected places, that wealth can be hidden in the most ordinary moments, and that sometimes the best things in life come from simply paying attention, taking a chance, and being willing to see what others overlook. She walked into a garage sale with $70 and an empty wall. She walked out with a painting that changed her life. And somewhere in that transaction, in that moment of casual exchange, a secret was revealed that had been hidden for nearly a century. That is the power of discovery. That is the nature of fortune. And that is the story of a woman who paid $8 for a painting and found something worth far more than money could measure. She found possibility. She found proof that the extraordinary exists alongside the ordinary, waiting to be noticed. She found that the world is full of hidden value, and all it takes to uncover it is curiosity, attention, and the willingness to believe that something small might contain something great. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about incredible discoveries, hidden fortunes, and the unexpected ways people stumble upon wealth, make sure to subscribe to Fortune Beneath. We bring you real stories of gold, treasure, and life-changing finds from across America. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And if this one resonated with you, share it with someone who loves a good mystery. Sarah Martinez still teaches occasionally, now as a volunteer rather than out of necessity. She still visits garage sales from time to time, though these days she does it for the pleasure of the hunt rather than the need to fill her apartment. She has not found another Edward Hopper. She has not stumbled upon another $10 million treasure. But she looks at every painting with a little more attention now. She examines the brushstrokes, the canvas, the frame. She wonders about the hands that created it and the lives it has passed through. She sees each object not just as a thing, but as a story waiting to be told. And maybe that is the real lesson of the $8 painting. Not that fortunes are hiding everywhere, though they might be. Not that anyone can stumble upon millions, though it is possible, but that every object, every moment, every seemingly insignificant choice carries the potential for something more. That the world is richer and more mysterious than we give it credit for. That value is not always visible on the surface, and that sometimes the most important discoveries come when we stop rushing, pay attention, and allow ourselves to see what has been there all along. The secret hidden inside an $8 painting was not just the signature of a famous artist or the market value assigned by collectors. It was the reminder that fortune and meaning can exist anywhere, in any form, waiting for someone curious enough to notice. Sarah found that secret. She paid $8 for it, and it gave her a life she never thought possible. That is how discovery works. That is how fortune reveals itself, one moment at a time, one object at a time, one person paying attention at a time. The world is full of secrets. Some of them are worth $8, some of them are worth 10 million, and the only way to find them is to keep looking, keep wondering, and keep believing that the next ordinary moment might contain something extraordinary. Sarah's story ended with a sold painting and a changed life, but the broader story continues every day. Somewhere right now, someone is walking through a garage sale, or an estate auction, or an antique shop. They are picking up objects, turning them over, wondering about their history. And maybe, just maybe, one of them is holding something worth far more than they realize. Maybe one of them is about to uncover a secret that has been hidden for decades. Maybe one of them is about to experience the same shock and wonder and disbelief that Sarah felt when she learned the truth about her $8 painting. That possibility, that potential, is what keeps people searching.